Hi, I'm Daniel Mayer, the Agriculture and Environmental Science teacher at Miami Junior Senior High School in Miami, Arizona. I moved here to Arizona in May of this past year, and so I've only been here about 6 months. And previously to that, I was living in Maryland for a year, about 30 minutes away from the White House, and then before that in Louisiana. I'm originally from Houma, Louisiana, about 45 minutes south of New Orleans. As you would probably expect, the water situation out east in Louisiana and in Maryland is very different than out here in Arizona in the west, particularly the southwest. Out east we have a lot more water, and much of our recreation revolves around water. As you would expect, a young person growing up in South Louisiana, I did a lot of things such as duck hunting and fishing and crabbing and all these different extra recreational activities that centered around water. And the same in Maryland. But then coming here, realized that young people have to entertain themselves very differently, simply because the water is just not available. There is just not the recreational opportunities surrounding water here as there are out east, and that translates into so much more than just recreation. The conservation of water in this state, and not only in Arizona, but in the entire Southwest, and not even just in the Southwest, but in essentially the western half of this nation, is critical because of the water situation that we are currently in with this extended drought and such. And then, of course, it's not just something that's going to affect humanity, but the wildlife and the local ecology. We must make decisions, long-term, sustainable decisions, that is going to guarantee the availability of water for humans and for the native ecology in these areas, and that is in particular for states like Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Nevada, Colorado. We must make decisions that are going to sometimes be hard decisions because the different interests in agriculture, in residential areas, and industry, everyone is going to have to do their part, making sometimes harder decisions than other times. And oftentimes not everyone is going to agree with the decisions that have to be made. But water is critical to all life. And when we regard the native ecology and the native wildlife, plants and animals that live in this area, they too depend on water. Of course, all life depends on water. And if we wish to maintain the extremely high level of biodiversity and endemism that occurs here in the Sonoran Desert and the surrounding area, water is the key to that level of biodiversity. And so, again, we have to make these decisions as responsible, educated, informed citizens of the society in order to maintain the greater good for the human population and for the population of life, essentially, at large, and not only for the current generations, but especially for future generations that will have to deal with our situations. And regarding more of my personal water story, one thing that I have really observed is such a difference in the behavior of the wildlife out here in the West versus in the East. I'm a bird watcher, and I really enjoy outdoor activities, and I often this shot is being made in the riparian preserve in Gilbert, Arizona, where I often come to watch birds and just walk around and enjoy nature. But it brings to mind that such a facility would not exist without water. And of course, much of the water here is reclaimed water, which is a sustainable process that we need to look into and invest in more, not just as a Gilbert community, but as an entire society more thoroughly in the future. But it reminds you about how water is the essence of life, and that without water, there is no life. This entire area simply would not exist. I know it's a little hard to see, but back there are mallards and cormorants, and this is just a very small amount of water here. Killdeer, some Canadian geese, many different species of birds here. And that's one thing, a big difference that I've noticed in the West, is that animals, the wildlife really congregates around these bodies of water, which of course in an arid region is not terribly surprising, particularly to ecologists. But in this area, the densities of animals, particularly birds, are far higher than out east, where birds are much less dense because there is so much more water, there's so much more available productive habitat than there is out here. And so that leads us into a different conversation about how critical it is to preserve these habitats that are available, that do have these supply of water out in the West for these wildlife species. But we really see these very concentrated densities of these different bird species here that bird watchers don't see. We don't observe as scientists and ecologists and bird watchers out in the east. So very different animal behavior patterns. And what we have to remind ourselves is out here in the west, in Arizona, in the southwest, we are in a drought right now. And these native species, they did evolve, plants and animals, they did evolve to live in an arid climate, an arid habitat. However, that cannot go on in perpetuity in terms of the drought. These species, there is going to be a limit, and these species are not going to be able to adapt to essentially, at least not as quickly, and not every species, to a drought that seems to never end. And so, of course, as humans, we are the species that controls the direction of the planet more than any other species by enormous numbers of magnitude. And so, if we have a desire for the entire humanity and for all life that lives in the Sonoran Desert and in the surrounding area to be able to continue here, we have to make decisions with water conservation in mind for the long-term sustainability of wildlife habitat, which also benefits humans, and then also for the future generations of humans, particularly keeping in mind that in these areas, such as the Phoenix metro that draw in such enormous populations, the demand on the local water supply is only going to increase. It's not going to decrease. And so we have to keep that in mind for future projections as well, in terms of where is our water demand going to be in the future, and where are the sources for that water demand going to come from. So this has been Daniel Mayer from Miami Junior Senior High School, and I hope that's helpful. Thank you.